accounting practice problem. Pay employees month 1. Get ready, because we're gonna excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we put together the Excel worksheet from a blank sheet. Now we're entering transactions into it. If you have access to it, there's 2 tabs on down below, the example tab and the practice tab. The practice tab starting out where we left off in the last presentation. The example tab in essence being an answer key. Let's take a look at it now. We're going to be then entering a payroll transaction, which will look something like this. But before we can, we're going to basically make a register, which is going to be all the way to the right here, which is going to be our focus this time. And then we'll use this register in order to enter the journal entries related to the payroll transactions. Let's go to the practice tab. Within the practice tab, we're going to do some cleanup work first. We're going to be hiding some cells on the left-hand side. So I'm going to be hiding from the skinny column all the way to the left. Going to right-click on the skinny column and hide those items, hiding them. We're going to copy the ending balances over here and right-click and copy them so we can pull them into our beginning balances. Right-click and pasting them 1, 2, 3. Delete the transactions in the middle so that we can focus in on where we want to be, which is going to be our transactions that will be the payroll transactions. But before we do, we're going to create a payroll register to pull the information from. So we'll put the payroll register all the way to the right here. So it's going to be all the way to the right. And we're going to put it between this ledger and the balance sheet. So I want to put it right in between here. So I'm going to put my cursor on the skinny. I'm going to add some cells going over to the EY. Right click and insert some cells. I'm going to clear the formatting on them, getting the formatting rid of that. And then I'm going to basically put my cursor on the skinny and format paintbrush the skinny column and put that over here. I want to reformat these cells to what I would like to see it as in this table. Right clicking on them, format those cells. I'm going to make them currency, brackets with the red and no decimals, and OK. So we're basically going to make a kind of a payroll register here that we can use to build our journal entry. Imagining we're paying 2 employees, those 2 employees, Adam Hamilton and Eric Smith. So let's make this one a little bit larger, this cell, and we're going to call this a payroll ledger, which I'll put down here. I'll put the headers first. Payroll ledger. I'm going to make these all bold too. I'm going to make everything bold. Make everything bold. I only work bold. I'm a bold worker. Super bold. Gross pay. Notice I'm not going to use the alignment tab over or the wrapping. I'm going to put 2 different rows when I need 2 different rows here so that I don't make it like a wide row that might mess things up to the left and the right. If you're not inserting a table, I think that's the better way to go oftentimes. The FIT, federal income tax. We're going to have social security, social. That's not how you spell it. Social, you could read it, couldn't you? You knew what it meant. Security, Medicare, and then net income. Okay, and then let's do some bolding over here, do some formatting, alignment. Let's make this centered. Let's make it black and white for our header. Let's make this one black and white too. And then we're going to have our 2 employees, which are going to be Adam Hamilton. I'm not sure if that's how you spell it, but that's going to be it. Then we're going to say how much he gets paid on a monthly basis. So we're going to assume we're paying monthly. Remember, your payroll periods could be monthly, weekly, semi-monthly, bi-weekly are the common payroll periods. And so we're going to say monthly here to go with it, so we don't have to run payroll multiple different times in our practice problem. And we're going to say that he gets paid salary of 4583. So we're going to say 4583 on the salaried pay. And then we got to think about what the withholdings will be. So we got FIT, Social Security, and Medicare. These are just going to be the federal withholdings. Note, you could have other, obviously you probably would have other withholdings as well, depending on the state that you're in, local withholdings. You could have union dues and whatnot. And then you could have voluntary types of withholdings, which could be things like the 401k plan, healthcare plans, and so on and so forth. We're going to stick to just the federal income tax withholdings or the federal withholdings, which are going to be the mandatory or required types of withholdings. The FIT, meaning federal income tax, not our tax that we pay as the employer, as the company, but the employee's tax, the one that they ultimately will pay, on their 1040 or report on the 1040. But we're going to be doing the withholding for them for that. That tax is a progressive tax, quite a complex tax, so we can't just do a flat calculation for it. We'd have to use the W-4, and then the W-4 would tell us all the stuff. They would be based on the marital status and so on, and extra exemptions and whatnot. Then we'd have to use a table to figure it out, and software is quite useful with regards to the FIT, given the fact that it is quite complicated. So we're not gonna get into the detail on that. I'm just gonna say it was 720. We're gonna assume we get that from the software, from the W-4, and so on and so forth. The Social Security is a bit more flat of a tax, so I could say this is typically going to be equal to the gross pay times 0.062. Now that could change, like to increase later on in the tax, but at least it's kind of flat. Although again, it does have a cap on it at some point in time. So if the income goes over a certain threshold, then there's a cap. So it does get quite complicated. Payroll also gets quite complicated due to the fact that you have to report this on a period by period basis as well as a year to date basis on the pay stub. You also have the reporting requirements that you have to it. And whenever you have a cap on something, then you have to know when that cap is applied in which period. Software is really useful to do this. The manual payroll gets a lot more difficult given the fact that no one individual part of payroll is really difficult. But when you put all the things that they want you to do together, you have a complex system, right? You now have something that's now complex just due to the many moving parts. So then the Medicare is usually going to be more of a flat tax too. It's usually going to be the employee portion, the gross pay times 0.10145. But we kind of messed it up in one of our practice problems that we want to line this one up to. So I'm going to mess this one up in the same way. I'm going to double click on it and we put an extra 0 here, I believe, to make it 7. That's not going to mess up anything because it's just a practice problem here because we're not getting exact on what the actual taxes are, but realize that one should be more of a flat tax. It should be an easier one to calculate generally as well. If I go then to the Erica is going to be our other employee. She's going to make $2,400. The FIT, once again, we're going to assume we get from the W-4, which we're going to say is $360. And then we're going to say the Social Security is going to be equal to the 2,400 times the 0.062. And then the Medicare we're going to say is equal to the 2,400 times the 0.0145. So that means that they're going to they earned, for example, Adam earned $4,583, but then they're going to be taking from them. We will take from them, or we will never give them. In other words, we will withhold part of their earnings, not because we get to keep it, but because we have to pay it on their behalf, in theory, to the government, these amounts, FIT, Social Security, and Medicare. So you can calculate this way. You could say I want that 4,583 gross pay minus the FIT, federal income tax, minus the Social Security, minus the 7 Medicare. Or I can do it this way for Erica, for example, equals this number minus the sum. This is a more elegant calculation. This is a little bit more impressive. Minus the sum of these 3. Closing it up, same thing. So that means that each employee, this employee, Erica, is going to earn $2,400, even though she didn't get these 3 amounts, but only got $1,856 because we had to keep these 3 amounts, not because we get to keep it forever, but because we need to pay it on Erica's behalf because we're forced to by the government to be their tax collector and pay it to the federal government. So that would be the general idea. Now note, we could total this up in total down below, summing this up, summing the gross pays, copying that across, Control C, holding Shift, right arrow, Control V. This would be our total. Now when we enter the journal entry, we could think of it as a check by check, or we could, for example, say I'm going to use this as my support register and then simply enter the total as if kind of like they were one employee as a journal entry into my account. There's pros and cons of either way to do it. If you were to run this, for example, in a QuickBooks system or an accounting system and use payroll within the system, it would give you each individual employee at which you would need in order to basically verify each employee and make all the supporting records and so on and so forth, and track each person's withholdings on a year-to-date basis and on a check-by-check basis and so on and so forth, provide the payroll stubs and all that kind of stuff. If you had a third-party provider do the payroll, and then you were taking their payroll and putting it into your accounting system, they might provide you something like this worksheet, and they might do the backup work like that. And then you might just enter it in with one journal entry, which would be a lot easier, although you do also still have to be careful of the complication that this will be touching the cash account. So if you put this in as a journal entry with one lump sum into the cash account, you're going to have to, when you reconcile, see the fact that it's going to hit the bank account and these two numbers, which might not be too bad to kind of figure out. So you can kind of work it in that way as well. And oftentimes, if you were to do that, you might then have a separate payroll account that you put money into just for payroll, and then take the money out so that you can reconcile, easily and be able to verify and check if there's any kind of problems to it. So you also might have another check figure at the end here. You might say you can also do it this way. This equals this number minus the sum of these. So you can calculate that last number two different ways. And then we're going to have the employer taxes. So we're going to have to pay our taxes over and above the employee taxes. So we got now employer tax. And we're not going to pay FIT. We don't have to match that, but we do have to match Social Security. And we've got to match the Medicare. We also might have on the federal side of things, federal unemployment tax. But I'm not going to add that because there's a small cap. It's usually a lot smaller of a dollar amount, and the cap gets a little confusing on it as well. So we're going to keep it at these core payroll taxes. So let's go ahead and then let's put a total over here too. Total, we'll total this up. And then I'm going to make this outer column. We're going to make this black, white. Let's center it. I'm going to make this whole thing black and white as well. And then we've got our two employees, which will be Adam and it will be Erica. We're going to bring down the dollar amounts, and we're just basically going to match Social Security and Medicare. So Social Security will match, Social Security will match, and then Medicare we will match. And Medicare, you could think of it as basically matching kind of like a 401k. That's kind of how they thought about it when they put the law into place and whatnot. So now we have to pay these amounts over and above the actual gross pay, basically paying kind of an income tax on the employee's income, even though their income is income that we paid them, and we're paying like taxes on the income that anyways. We're then going to sum it up over here, sum it up over here, and sum it up over here. And then we can then take the total, summing this up in total, copying this and pasting it across. And then we can also double check this way, summing up this way too. And we should get that to that same 474 as well. So what's going to happen then when we record this into the system? We're going to say, we could look at it in total. The employees in total earned $6,983, but they're only going to get the $5,429. That's how much it's going to decrease the checking account, but it's going to be in two separate checks. The difference is going to increase the payroll liabilities, FIT, Social Security, and Medicare. Then we're going to have to pay over and above, on top of that, the employer taxes, which we have generated or incurred at the point in time that payroll happened, but which we have not yet paid, so cash isn't affected at the point payroll is processed for these taxes. Instead, they're going to increase the payroll liability and record the expense as payroll expense. Okay, so that means the total payroll liability we can put down here. This is going to be payroll liability, and we're going to say that we're going to have FIT, we're going to have Social Security, we're going to have Medicare, we're going to have the total, and let's do some formatting on the black and white here, black, white, and let's center, and let's format these as black and white, and then we'll just call this payroll liability. Okay, so the FIT is just going to be the employee tax. It's not our tax. The Social Security is the employee tax plus the employer side. The Medicare is the employee plus the employer side. Summing these up is going to be this way. You can't double check by adding these two because you have that FIT, which is, you have a difference between the two. Okay. So now one more time, one more recap on this. What's going to happen in total? We can say our employees are going to earn $6,983, which is going to be a debit to the expense account, payroll expense that they have earned, but they're only going to get 5492, meaning the checking account's going to be decreased with two actual different transactions that will hit the bank statement of 5492, the decrease to the checking account. The difference is what we had to take from the employees or never give them, even though in theory they earned it, so we can pay it on their behalf to the government. So that's going to increase a liability account, payroll liability. In addition to that, by us processing payroll, we have to incur taxes on ourselves as the employer, basically because we have employees. So we got to pay over and above what we pay the employees, basically paying tax on their earnings that we paid them, in essence. And so that we're not going to pay yet at the point in time we process the payroll. We are instead going to be recording the expense of the tax expense and increase the liability that we're going to pay in the future. Therefore, the liability that we have piled up that we're going to have to pay to the government from this transaction is FIT, which is just the employee side that we took from the employee, or in other words, withheld from them. The Social Security, which has an employee and an employer portion, so half of what we are paying, in essence, came from the employee and half of it is our portion. Same with the Medicare. So this is what we would expect the total liability to be that we will have to pay. Let's go ahead and delete this last column and do some formatting. Right click and delete this column. Let's make this blue and bold. I'm going to select all this stuff and hold down Control and hit that one, making this blue. If you don't have that blue, it's in the more colors. And that blue right there. And bordered it. Blue and border. Blue and border. Border blue. Border blue. So blue and the border. And then this one also borders and blue. Okay, so then next time we're going to use this information to make the journal entry that we just talked about this time.